So good evening and welcome to the Houston Environmental Communities Candidate Forum for the Democratic Party's runoff for Harris County Commissioner Precinct 3. My name is Mary Van Kerrebrook. Our Zoom experts and co-hosts tonight are Jessica Moreno and Fidel Martinez. Tonight's forum is available in Spanish. Our interpreter is Abraham Martinez, and I'm going to turn it over to him to explain how to access the translation. Abraham?
Hi there, my name is Abraham Martinez. I represent Tilde, which is a co-op, and our vision is a multilingual world in which all languages are respected, languages work, it's valued, and all people can fully participate in movements for social justice and collective liberation. If you need Spanish interpretation, please dial 720-820-1525, 720-820-1525, and make sure you put your phone on mute. Again, this number is 720-820-1525. Sí, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Abraham Martínez. Trabajo con Tilde. Es donde nosotros apreciamos el valor multicultural y también diferentes lenguajes, y donde los lenguajes son respetados. Así que esto es para la liberación colectiva y justicia social. Para las personas que ocupen interpretación de inglés a español, favor de marcar al 720-820-1525, 720-820-1525, y asegurarse de pagar la bocina de su teléfono. Gracias. Thank you. Mary, your microphone is on mute.
Sorry. If you have any problems with your video or microphone, there will be multiple links in the chat room that can help you find solution. And if you're using iOS or Android, we also have troubleshooting information in the chat room on those. I am just here to introduce and conclude the forum. The questions will be asked by our panel of distinguished Houston environmental leaders. We will also post those questions in the chat room in both English and Spanish as the questions are asked. Tonight, we have the privilege of talking with the two candidates who will meet in the Democratic Party's runoff for Harris County Commissioner Precinct 3. The election date is July 14th, and early voting starts, I believe, on June 29th. The candidates are Diana Martinez-Alexander and Michael Moore. Thank you both for joining us this evening. We have gotten questions from some folks who ask why there's no Republican joining us tonight. There is no Republican runoff. The Republican candidate is Tom Ramsey. We will hold a second forum before the general election with Mr. Ramsey and the Democratic Party candidate who is selected in the runoff. We plan that general election forum for August, and we hope that you'll join us then as well. This nonpartisan forum is co-hosted by several Harris County environmental groups. They are Air Alliance Houston, Bayou City Waterkeeper, Bayou Land Conservancy, Bayou Preservation Association, Citizens Environmental Coalition, SEER, the Coalition for Environment, Equity, and Resilience, the Houston Sierra Club, Houston Tomorrow, the Katy Prairie Conservancy, the National Wildlife Federation, and THEA, the Texas Health and Environment Alliance. Tonight, we've asked Ms. Martinez-Alexander and Mr. Moore to each give a 1-minute opening statement. Then our panelists will ask questions, which will be the same question for each of the two candidates. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to answer each question. The views expressed tonight are not those of our co-sponsors, and to ensure fairness, I will need to stop the candidates at the 3-minute mark. We'll end with closing statements for which each candidate has 4 minutes. A coin toss a few minutes ago determined that Mr. Moore will give the first opening statement. Michael Moore.
Hello, everybody. My name is Michael Moore, and I'd like to earn your support for Harris County Commissioner Precinct 3 in the July 14th Democratic runoff. We have major issues facing Harris County. We've got a pandemic and we got an economic downturn. On top of that, we are living here in Harris County and Houston, we are living climate change. We've seen 500-year floods within 5 years. We've got major issues. I've got the experience to make a difference. I was former chief of staff to Bill White at the city of Houston, who tackled many environmental issues. Numerous ones we have been written up, been studied, and we just did, on certain issues, we did an amazing job. I'm going to talk about those more during this hour, and I'd love to earn your support. Thank you. You're on mute.
Thank you. Ms. Martinez-Alexander.
Hello, I'm Diana Martinez-Alexander, running for Harris County Commissioner Court. I'm a mom, I'm an educator, and an activist organizer since the 2016 election. I thought that voting was enough, but clearly it wasn't, and we decided to run. So I've been focused on making sure that we have move towards a county climate crisis plan. We would be the first county in Texas to have such a plan. Then also making sure, especially during these times of the pandemic, that we're looking at barriers to access of services for medical care, transportation, and education, and doing all that with a lens of transparency and accountability to the residents of Precinct 3. And I'm so proud that our grassroots campaign has pulled out a win in the primary. So what we need to do in the runoff is make sure that we seal the deal so we can have someone in the commissioner's court who will fight for working families. So thank you so much for having me this evening, all these organizations, for organizing this.
Thank you. Our first question tonight will be asked by Iris Gonzalez. Iris is the Coalition Director for the Coalition for Environment, Equity, and Resilience, or CEER. Iris?
Good evening. Frontline communities are disproportionately harmed by climate change impacts like flooding and extreme heat. The climate crisis has a multiplier effect in these communities, threatening not just health, but also the availability of clean water, food, housing, jobs, transportation, and infrastructure. Policies like the legacy of housing discrimination and allowing refineries near residential communities make these problems worse and raise ethical and political concerns about who exacerbates climate change and who suffers the impacts. If we want a future where all are protected equitably, we must work to include these communities' voices, stories, and actions in the decision-making process. As commissioner, how will you ensure that Black, brown, and non-white communities in Harris County are prioritized and protected from the harms of the climate crisis? Describe your approach and the resources you will dedicate to ensure impacted communities lead the process.
And this question is first from Ms. Martinez-Alexander.
I am so sorry, my dog is barking. So I want to make sure that we already know that we have the research that indicates that we have a higher number of Black residents living near oil and gas plants, higher incidence of asthma and lost school days for Black children. And these higher temperatures that we have with climate crisis have led to underweight, premature, and stillborn babies, particularly for Black mothers. And so that compounds the impact of COVID with these communities because of that comorbidity with high blood pressure, asthma, and other breathing issues. So what we need to do is to lean on the new maps that are coming out and data and the learning opportunities that we have from Harvey to target resources and connect with community organizations that are already doing the work. So I'm committed to having a community liaison to focus specifically on environmental equity and recognize the decades of efforts from groups wherever possible, and focus on the need for safe housing, clean water, and making sure that we're monitoring air appropriately. You know, we have our hands tied because we have to focus on the parameters that were given by the state and the federal government, but we can still work within our capacity to make sure that we strengthen the pollution control department within the county.
Thank you. The same question to Mr. Moore.
Iris, got unmute. Oh, I'm unmuted. Iris, I totally agree with your premise. Climate crisis is real, and underserved communities have had the greatest impact. Generations of discrimination, from segregation to redlining to environmental racism, lack of good schools, healthcare, etc., have gotten us to this point. The Harris County Public Health Study recently, I guess it was last year, released a report that underserved areas, their life expectancy is 24 years less than other areas. That's just wrong. And I will fight to help you do something about that. We did that at the city of Houston when I was there, when we went after benzene and butadiene. I'll talk about that a little bit more later. But how do we get you involved? I've been looking ever since I got this question, Iris, and one of the areas was, one of the things I came up with, which was HARC uses, that you might be familiar with, was the community-based participation, research, and action. It's about getting the community involved and research the issue and come up with the action plan to make it happen. I don't know if you've used it, I don't know if you're a part of that, but it's something I like. But I would work closely with you to have the community involved. We're going to talk about an issue a little bit later with the water supply. I know Adrian Garcia has worked with you closely and got you involved in a number of the explosions that have happened, talking to the industry. I would do the same. I would also, we've had a commissioner for over 30 years that has not worked with the community mostly. He goes out and does what he wants. I commit that I will be a commissioner for the entire precinct, over 1.2 million people, whether it be Alief, Gulfton, or Katy, or wherever. And in that, basically there's not an outreach team. I commit to have an outreach team that looks like the community, that everybody knows, that you know by name and work with. I'll also commit to have a full-time position in that team that helps development community participation and works with you to do that. And not only participation, but have an action plan to work on. So I agree with you, and we'll work with you closely to make that, to work on that issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Our second question will be asked by Bakeyah Nelson, who is the Executive Director of Air Alliance Houston. Bakeyah, and your question will go to Michael Moore first.
Thank you, Mary. Harris County has over 400 chemical and manufacturing sites, over 150 concrete batch plants, and over 140 metal recycling sites. All can expose us to harmful air pollutants. Since we don't have adequate land use policies, many Harris County residents live, work, and play close by these facilities. As Precinct 3 Commissioner, how will you work transparently and equitably with everyone involved or affected, including other county precincts and cities, to strengthen community air monitoring? What steps will you take to stop the siting of toxic facilities in flood zones? How will you work to prevent chemical explosions and hold facilities like Watson Grinding accountable? And what resources will you commit to this work?
Thank you. That's a good question. Yes, we need to get to a point where every community that needs a monitor on the monitor issue, which you talked about, community monitors, has a monitor. There are different size monitors. There's the big, expensive $400,000 monitors that cost more to operate in a year. There's also, I know this, the county is doing a testing of 2 different monitors, a $12,000 and a $4,000. We need to, every community that needs one or wants one or feels like they need one should be able to get one. Now, whether the county pays for it, we develop a grant program through the county. Somebody should be able to do that. I know the county has been, I like what Adrian Garcia and others have done on adding new resources to pollution control in the county. It is badly needed. They used to operate like, they used to save money in that department instead of spend it protecting people. So we need more monitors. We also need a website where people can read it. It says, it has the numbers up there. They're easily understood. They're easily read. So I'll work together. I'll also work on the batch plant issue. The county has a stronger enforcement mechanism than the city. The city doesn't always work with the county on this. I come from the city. I used to be the chief of staff, and part of my job was worked with other government entities. Hats off to what the Commissioner's Court is doing right now on this issue. I will be an ally in that. On toxic facilities in flood zones, you got to get to the permit process in the beginning, right off the bat. And the number one thing you can do on this is elect Christian Menifee to county attorney. Because if you don't have a strong county attorney that thinks like you do, there's not much you can do. We can already see what TCEQ, working with TCEQ, they don't always do what we want. They usually do what industry wants. So we need to elect Christian Menifee, get early in the permit process if we want to stop those being cited in flood zones. And basically you're going to have the entire Commissioner's Court on your side doing that. On the Watson grinding, we need to have, and I know Adrian's working on a website to actually take, I think it's the STEERS reports for, air pollution doesn't stop at a boundary. We need to get that website up, put the STEERS reports in it, but also use it for the fire marshals. When the fire marshals have a violation, we need to put that on there and people can see it and people can research it. Community organizations like yourselves can point out. We also need to, there's about $4.6 million, I think, was put into the fire.
3 minutes.
We need to continue that. I've got a lot more to talk about that. I'll talk about it later. I love this issue. Thank you.
Our third question will be asked by Marianne Piacentini. Marianne is the the president and CEO of the Katy Prairie Conservancy. Marianne, if you will direct your question to Diana Martinez Alexander first.
Thank you, Mary. After Hurricane Harvey, many people in the community felt that historical approaches to flood control were not working. In its report, the protective voice of value of nature, the National Wildlife Federation actually noted evidence suggests that both natural and nature-based solutions for hazard mitigation can be equally or more effective than conventional structural approaches, and they are often more cost-effective. They also provide additional benefits, especially in terms of quality of life, and they keep people from harm's way, especially those in the hardest hit and most vulnerable communities. As Commissioner, how will you have precinct and county departments work with conservation groups to develop natural and nature-based approaches to flood mitigation? What kinds of projects will you work to? And last, how will you require or mandate projects to respect the environmental and flood mitigation benefits of those lands that are already conserved? Thank you.
So to answer this question, it's really critical to understand the importance of keeping as much grassland and native land intact as possible. I know that Precinct 3 is growing, and the capacity for new housing developments is very tempting. But the thing is that to preserve those areas and incorporate bioretention strategies to increase flood mitigation wherever possible, it is cost effective. When we use those native plants to filter the water runoff and keep those large areas intact, that is much more of an effective strategy to prevent flooding farther down in more urban areas. And so we have to work in concert with the conservation groups to educate residents and homeowners associations and multifamily management residential companies to encourage more green strategies so we can continue to protect those species like the Atwater prairie chicken, like the Texas prairie dawnflower, and others that are at risk of being lost. And so once we lose those, we can't get that back. And it's important for us to make sure that we're keeping that biodiversity and also building with that green, those green practices in mind. Tuning into stakeholders is key. Making sure that we're checking in with them, with the people that are already doing the work, who know, that are experts that already know about these issues, is critical. And if we don't have buy-in, then we can't work towards a mutual path.
You're muted. You're muted, Mary.
I just realized, I believe I skipped you, Ms. Martinez Alexander. I apologize. We're going to skip back to Bakeyah Nelson's question, Executive Director of Air Alliance Houston. Bakeyah, would you mind asking your question again for Ms. Martinez Alexander? And I am so sorry about that.
Sure. Harris County has over 400 chemical and manufacturing sites, over 150 concrete batch plants, and over 140 metal recycling sites. All can expose us to harmful air pollutants. Since we don't have adequate land use policies, many Harris County residents live, work, and play close by these facilities. As Precinct 3 Commissioner, how will you work transparently and equitably with everyone involved or affected, including other county precincts and cities, to strengthen community air monitoring? What steps will you take to stop the siting of toxic facilities in flood zones? How will you work to prevent chemical explosions and hold facilities like Watson Grinding accountable? And what resources will you commit to this work?
So it is absolutely critical that we look at where these facilities are located. We have those concentrated in lower SES areas, socioeconomic areas, and it overly impacts the Black and brown community. And so if we have that awareness, then we know the impact that it has on other health outcomes. And so again, we have to use maps to focus on those facilities in those danger areas to make sure that we're using all tools at our disposal for monitoring and accountability. So that takes working in conjunction with the county attorney's office whenever possible to pursue lawsuits like they did with Watson Grinding and Engineering. I live just over a mile from that plant, and the impact of that was interesting because on the south side of Clay Road, there was a concentration on, getting lawsuits, people filing lawsuits personally because of their damage. But on the north side, I didn't feel like there was enough attention to their needs as far as rebuilding and getting access to community resources. So all of that is important. So you need to hear from stakeholders that are impacted by that air quality. And of course it travels, right? But that takes increasing the capacity of the Houston County Pollution Control Department. They've already had a budget increase from last year to this year of just over $1 million, but it's going to take more funds to make sure that we are monitoring and holding them accountable, holding these corporations accountable. And if there is a violation, making sure that people know about it. People need to understand that corporations can't just go willy-nilly without repercussions. And we have to make sure that we're protecting the public health.
Thank you. Mary Ann, would you mind asking your question again for Mr. Moore?
Sorry, sure. After Hurricane Harvey, many people in the community recognized that historical approaches to flood control were not working. In its report, The Protective Value of Nature, the National Wildlife Federation noted, evidence suggests that both natural and nature-based approaches for hazard mitigation can be equally or more effective than conventional structural approaches, and they are often more cost-effective. They also provide additional benefits, especially in terms of quality of life. Natural infrastructure projects can also keep people out of harm's way, especially those in the hardest hit and most vulnerable communities. Question, as commissioner, how will you have precinct and county departments work with conservation and other environmental groups to develop natural and nature-based approaches for flood mitigation? What kinds of projects will you work toward? How will you mandate that projects respect the environmental and flood mitigation benefits of conserved lands?
Thank you, Mary Ann. I believe in this approach, and I pledge that if elected county commissioner, that this will be a priority for the county. We've got a $2.5 billion infusion plus federal dollars and stuff in flood mitigation. We need to get it right. We cannot control water. We need to learn how to manage it. That $2.5 billion, the majority of it is going to gray infrastructure on pipes, cleaning out. Maybe Creek, they've cleaned out 25,000 square feet of dirt. They got another 25,000 square feet to go. 50,000 square feet of dirt out of one unmaintained canal, creek. That's what they're doing. They're fixing old infrastructure from 40, 50, 60 years ago. There's going to be another. They're going to have to come back. Even Judge Emmett, when said that $2.5 billion wasn't enough, we're going to have to go back and do another $2.5 billion. That should be spent on nature-based infrastructure. I believe in saving the Katy Prairie. Whatever we do, they've got about 10,000 acres in Harris County under management. We need to double it, and the county needs to be a partner with you in doing that. The entire Katy Prairie is in a 100-year, 500-year floodplain. We need to keep it natural, and you have my commitment that that'll happen. We need increased protected lands. As double side of the Katy Prairie. I believe in nature-based infrastructure. I know that the flood control district is working on a pilot project called bioswells. We need to use bioswells or swells everywhere. You got these big box stores with parking lots. All they're doing is funneling the water to a drain that gets faster to the bio. And we need something that slows down that water so that we have those bayous have a chance to drain to the bay. We also need to use low impact development. I can go on and on. This is something that I believe in. This is something we need to invest in as a county. If we don't get this right, I've got two young girls. I got a 4-year-old and a 2.5-year-old, believe it or not. And I want them to live here the rest of their life. And I want them to have a quality of life that I've had growing up here. I grew up in Precinct 3. I was part of the Bill White administration. We worked on issues like to protect the environment I pledge to do that as county commissioner. Oh, and one thing, I think you're talking about I got a couple more seconds, Marianne, we can talk about this more. I think you're talking about if they're on that last question, if the Corps of Engineers coming in with a big project, I don't think they're going to do it. I think what I'm hearing is the grading is too low on that third reservoir. That means your project is even more important. We'll know in the middle of the summer, the Corps of Engineers.
3 minutes.
So we have more to talk about. Thank you.
Our fourth question will be asked by David Crossley, who is the president of Houston Tomorrow. And David, if you will, direct your question first to Mr. Moore.
Thank you. To fight the climate crisis, we need to stop killing plants and forests that pull carbon out of the air. Road expansion encourages and subsidizes land development of farms and forests, making the climate crisis worse. We should spend development money in existing towns and cities and neighborhoods to build complete neighborhoods that meet the basic needs of all residents in a community, regardless of income, culture, or political ideologies. Question, will you act to end road expansion in Precinct 3?
Hey, David, good question. Right now, most of the county's developed. We can look at a map and we can have a difference on what's developed, except for west of the Grand Parkway. Right now, there's a thoroughfare plan. There's existing roadways through there, farm to market roads and others. There's a thoroughfare plan by the county. The thoroughfare plan goes to the county and the city. I know they've taken a thoroughfare or two off of it in recent years. I think they need to take more. We don't need any thoroughfares going through the Katy Prairie or those undeveloped land. When you put a thoroughfare in those undeveloped areas, all it does is create more development. These are 100-year and 500-year floodplains. We need to use them as natural sponges and keep them in as much as their natural state as possible, or redevelop, make sure they get to their natural state. So I'm against expanding thoroughfares west of the Grand Parkway. I think the rest of it is mainly developed inside. You can point out some other areas to me at any time, but we need to increase density closer in. We need to build this green infrastructure that helps create more density. You're seeing density inside 610. We need to make that density from Beltway 8 to 610. And let's create more green infrastructure so that we can enjoy the beautiful quality of life here. We got a 12-month growing season here. And so I'm against adding any new thoroughfares outside the Grand Parkway.
Ms. Martinez Alexander.
So we have a unique opportunity here. What we know is that the research tells us whenever we build more roads, we have more cars, more traffic. It doesn't do anything to alleviate congestion. It just adds more of it. And so what we need to do is change our mindset and move towards a different type of infrastructure. It's an opportunity for us to expand our thinking and explore new concepts in housing that have increased opportunities for walkability and biking, that have housing and shopping, all sorts of residential in a compact area, and work with other governmental entities to expand green space. I know that that's something that hasn't been done historically in Precinct 3, working with the city and other governmental entities to make sure that we're capitalizing on opportunities to expand biking trails. So if we do that, then, and also on the other side, expand or encourage opportunities for telecommuting, then we can lessen the demand for roads. This I-45 should be an example of what we learned from I-10. I-10, took out a lot of green space, removed a lot of business in the hopes that we were going to reduce traffic, but that hasn't been the case. And so now with I-45, we're wiping out Black and brown communities, and they're going to be impacted negatively through that expansion. And so if we're thinking about, you know, expanding roads, we also have to think about the ecological and the social impact of that growth. And so sometimes that growth just might need to look different. We have an opportunity in Harris County to be leaders. We panic every time it rains, and now we can move forward with solution-based processes that will be an example for the rest of the country.
Thank you. Our next question is from Jordan Macha, who is the Executive Director of Bayou City Waterkeeper. And Jordan, if you will direct your question first to Diana Martinez Alexander.
Thank you so much. Most of Harris County's bayous, rivers, and streams down to Galveston Bay are listed as impaired by the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. This means they are too polluted or degraded to meet basic water quality standards, preventing residents across our region from safely drinking, fishing, or swimming in these waters. This ongoing problem is caused by changes to habitat, stormwater runoff, and pollution released by industry and failing wastewater treatment facilities. While impairments to our waterways are widely felt, the direct source of pollution and lack of proper infrastructure is highly concentrated in Black and brown and Asian communities. As Commissioner, what will you do to fix the impaired waterways in unincorporated Harris County? And how will you facilitate a transparent solution with interested stakeholders, including affected communities, the City of Houston, and other municipalities, to equitably address this regional problem and hold polluters accountable?
So too often improvements have been made using a benefit cost analysis, and that doesn't always benefit the people that live in poorer communities because their life is not seen and their well-being is not taken into account. And so I know that the Commissioner's Court has taken some steps to counteract that process, but there's still a lot of work to do. So it's making sure that we pinpoint target areas that would have the most impact to improve drainage using native plants, using those bioretention strategies, and also on the other side, making sure that we're using the code that has been recently adopted to hold developers accountable for their part in creating water issues. So that takes a continual outreach to community members to gather their input and hear concerns, because there are people on the ground facing these issues head on, and we need to hear from them. And also using green materials whenever possible in these unincorporated areas, like permeable concrete when possible. We need to start thinking outside the box, because using the same tried strategies haven't been working, and they've been escalating the situation to a point to where now it is critical that we act.
You're on. You're muted, Mary. Mary, you want me to go ahead?
Sorry, same question for Mr. Moore.
Jordan, first of all, I'll work with the bacteria implementation group. I think HCACs, I think they've made some headway over the years. And their implementation plan has had some success. I know in the unincorporated area, we've got an issue with muds. We've got 70% of the county's muds within Precinct 3, and 70%, and Harris County's got like 70% of the entire state. Each of them has their own wastewater treatment plant. They're aging. You've seen what happened with the City of Houston. The EPA went after them. It's going to be a multi-billion-dollar fix. We can't get that way in the unincorporated area. Even though we've got to come up with solutions, we've got to work with the muds. We have to come up with solutions like each one of them has their own wastewater treatment plant. We need to come up with solutions like when they're aging, okay, let's build one wastewater treatment plant for 5 or 10. That water is valuable. The outflow from those treatment plants is actually cost money. It's an income stream for them. It will cost them less if they build it together. Now, this is a long-term solution. It's not a short one, working with them and trying to build one huge multi-million-dollar wastewater treatment plants. So we've got to do that. We've also got, I said this earlier, we've got to elect Christian Menifee, county attorney. Now, I only met him on the campaign trail. He won. I think he's good. We need somebody in the county attorney's office going to hold polluters accountable. We need to go to their permitting. When they get re-permitted, we need to be there and point out what they've done by polluting the water. We just can't let them have a pass. So many times governments just don't show up. We did that at the city of Houston when I was there under Bill White, Lena Marks, and others. And we went in there and we challenged permits. And they fixed, some of them, most of them that we went in and challenged, they acted a little bit better the next day because you're pointing it out to them. If you don't point it out to them, they're gonna do what they used to do. I used to work at the city of Houston as chief of staff. I used to work with other government entities and nonprofits. I will do the same as county commissioner. We've had a county commissioner, like I said earlier, for 30 years that hasn't really worked with people. I'm going to be different when I get elected. I'm going to show up. I'm going to be counted, and I'm going to work with both nonprofits, environmental groups, but also government entities to make sure we make a difference. My girls live here. The water is polluted. We live not too far from Buffalo Bayou. I've lived probably 2 miles from Buffalo Bayou most of my life. And I want to make a difference. And my 3 minutes is up. Thank you. You're muted, Mary.
I am so sorry. Our final question of the evening will be asked by Jackie Young Medcalf, who is the president of Texas Health and Environment Alliance, or THEA. And Jackie, if you will, direct your question first to Mr. Moore.
Yes, thank you, Mary. Alief has among the highest rates in the U.S. of chromium-6 in their tap water that is supplied by the city of Houston. Chromium-6 is not individually regulated by the federal government. However, it is well known to cause many adverse health effects. Despite the lack of federal regulations, what is your position on protecting public health from the invisible contaminants that can slip under the radar and into our homes?
I've called the city of Houston when I got this question. I have to admit, I'm not up on this issue. When I don't know something, I will call people that do know something and I will learn about it and take action. So I admit that to y'all. I do know that there were some other areas in the city that chromium-6 was a problem, and they plugged some wells and they fixed that problem. And I would work with the city council member to find out what is the source of it that is going to Alief. That water is coming from far away. So why is it that water polluted in Alief? And there is a source, and we need to find that source. The EPA does not, the EPA monitors the carcinogen that you breathe in, but not in water. That is totally ridiculous. As well as electing Christian Menifee, we need a new president so that we take care of the environment. So I'll work on this issue. I'll work with Councilmember Thomas to make a difference in it. The current county commissioner kind of stops his authority at City of Houston line. That's not going to be me. I'm going to be a county commissioner for the entire precinct. That means Alief, that means Gulfton, that means Katy, all over the precinct. So I'll get more involved in this issue. And actually, I will call you after this in the next couple of days to find out more about this issue.
And the same question to Diana Martinez Alexander.
So in researching this issue, it comes really clear that it's been talked about for several years. we don't have a solution or a source, but there are a lot of recycling centers in the A-leaf area. And so they use certain chemicals to clean the cans. And so those chemicals that's including chromium-6. And so the short-term solution is trying to facilitate getting filters for residents to use. But there is, drawbacks with those filters because over time the metal collects in the filters. Because at this point, they all have unsafe water, like extreme high counts of chromium compared to what is acceptable. And so I know that chromium-6 isn't considered a hazard, but the problem is that the EPA has backed off on all of their monitoring because of COVID-19. And so that really leaves these vulnerable communities at a loss because corporations may take advantage of that lack of oversight to do more than they should. So we do need to continue the efforts that were started by Steve Lee and then continued by Tiffany Thomas and community members like Barbara Quattro to make sure that they're measuring the groundwater well safety, because there are 4 of them that need to be monitored, and then also find out if there are any cancer clusters in that area due to the outbreak. So we can make sure that we're taking care of those residents' health. And, we already know that COVID-19 is leading to people not accessing care for other ailments due to just lack of access to medical care. And so we need to make sure that we're being aware of all of the issues. And air pollution, it affects us all. We have higher numbers of ozone days here in Houston because of all of the plants and manufacturers here in the area. And I know that we have that reputation of being easy on business. But the thing is that we all live here and we have to breathe the air and drink the water, and we deserve to have a clean space, and people deserve to have a safe place to live. And so we need to make sure that we're holding these businesses and corporations accountable.
Thank you. We are at the end of our panelists' questions. And so we are going to allow each candidate up to 4 minutes for a closing statement, beginning with Dinah Martinez-Alexander.
Okay, so I have focused all along on making sure that we have a county climate crisis plan, making sure that we're using land in a green way, making sure that we communicate with the community about what they can do to adopt more green practices, and also make sure that we have businesses go along with our infrastructure that that moves Houston and Harris County into the future. And we need to make sure that we are focused on what we can do to be solution driven. I know that people are still recovering from Harvey, and we're just waiting for the next big storm. And so that means that we need to make sure and protect all of the natural landscape, as including the Katy Prairie as much as possible, expanding green space, reducing the amount of cars on the road, increasing opportunities for telecommuting, and making sure that, if people can carpool, we can do that. But of course, in times of COVID, we have to adjust our strategy. It's all about public health. And I've been a resident in this area for most of my life, and I know that I want Houston to be a leader and capitalize on the academic resources that we have in the area and the business leadership and capacity that we have in the area to make sure that Houston is not again victimized by climate change. And we have an opportunity and a duty to make sure that we're doing that for our children, for our residents, and for the wildlife in our area. And so we can only do this together. I hope to have your support in the runoff. And I thank you again for having me here on this forum. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Moore.
Thank you, everybody, for hosting this. I really do appreciate it. Thank you, Diana. We have a choice who to elect to the Democratic primary on July 14th. I hope I'm your choice. I have the experience to make a difference in not only in the environment. We've got major issues facing Harris County with COVID and the economic downturn, but we have just as major big issue with climate change. We have to get it right. We have to increase our natural infrastructure, our green infrastructure. We have to have somebody that has been there fighting polluters. I have been there. I was Bill White's chief of staff. I worked with an amazing team that took unique approaches to get the industry to stop polluting over their fence line in the water. We went after polluters of benzene and butadiene in a unique way that has been written up and studied throughout this country. We decreased the amount of benzene and butadiene in the country, in the Harris County starting in 2003, because we had an approach and we went after them, and we went after them with science, and we went after them with facts. And we're able to reduce those levels of cancer-causing agents unseen in this area. We also went after the Goodyear plant, had them reduce their emissions, on and on. We've got Judge Hidalgo, Rodney Ellis, and Adrian Garcia, who are fighting this fight. I will be an active player, and I will support them. I've got the endorsement of people like Jim Blackburn, Elena Marks, Rodney Ellis, Adrian Garcia, Bill White, who I look up to in this area, and a lot of people do. We tackled when Rick Perry was trying to permit, I think it was 8 coal fire plants, and rush through these permits. City of Dallas reached out to us to help them fight it. They were gonna fly through. We went after them and we stopped those permits because we got a heavyweight attorney to do pro bono work, and he didn't even have to file a lawsuit. Well, actually, he did file a lawsuit, and we stopped those 8 coal fire power plants from being permitted. They would have been grandfathered for the rest of their life. We stopped those with the City of Dallas. We need to show up. We need to fight permits. We need to, when there's a bad actor, when they re-up for their permit, we need to talk about it and make them become good actors. Again, we need to elect a good county attorney that can be a partner with us. If we don't, we're gonna have issues. I would like to have your vote. I believe in this issue. Again, I've got 2 girls that live here. I want them to have an environment that's free of air pollution. And I want to earn your vote. This is a very important election. We've had a county commissioner for over 30 years that doesn't believe in community engagement. I do. And again, I'd love to have your vote. Thank you for having us. Appreciate it.
Thank you. This has been the Houston Environmental Communities Candidate Forum with Democratic Party's runoff candidates for Harris County Commissioner Precinct 3. This is an informational forum, and the statements expressed are not those of the sponsoring organizations. I want to thank profusely Diana Alexander Martinez and Michael Moore for being with us this evening. Thank you both so much. I want to thank our Zoom experts, Fidel Martinez and Jessica Moreno, tonight's translator, Abraham Martinez, our co-sponsors, Thea, the National Wildlife Federation, the Katy Prairie Conservancy, Houston Tomorrow, the Houston Sierra Club, SEER, the Citizens Environmental Coalition, the Bayou Preservation Association, Bayou Land Conservancy, Bayou City Waterkeeper, and Air Alliance Houston. Most of all, thank all of you for watching. We hope that you'll join us again for the Houston Environmental Communities General Election Candidate Forum in August, when we will visit with Republican candidate Tom Ramsey and the winner of the Democratic Party's runoff election for Harris County Commissioner Precinct 3. Thank you all and have a good evening.